What happens when you stop showing up? Not out of malice, not out of anger, but from an unspoken need to protect your inner world. Few understand it, but withdrawal carries an unsettling gravity. It disturbs something deep within others, something even they struggle to name. When you walk away, even quietly, you unravel a delicate web of expectations, dependencies, and silent roles you never volunteered to play. You were never just a person in their lives. You were a placeholder for what they refused to confront within themselves. Your presence became a stabilizer they clung to without ever realizing it. The discomfort that follows your departure isn't rooted in love or loss. It's the terror of facing what's left behind. Your silence screams louder than your words ever did. It reflects back to them the emptiness they thought they had hidden, the fractures in their identity, and the fear of being seen without a mirror to shape their illusion. Today, we won't tread lightly. We're diving into the emotional undercurrents that surge when you decide to reclaim your peace. This is not about abandonment. It's about awakening. This is the shadow side of human connection, where your absence doesn't create distance but revelation. A revelation of how deep you ran in their story and how little they ever saw the real you. 1. Not all chains make a sound when they break. Some are so subtle, so intricately woven into the fabric of our daily lives that we never even realize they're there until we release them. And when you decide to step back, not dramatically, not with the slam of a door, but with a quiet reclaiming of your space, those threads begin to unravel. The shock doesn't come from your absence. It comes from the realization that they never truly saw the role you played in their emotional ecosystem. You were the silent translator of their confusion, the unspoken permission for their dysfunctions. You didn't just exist in their life. You balanced it, often without intending to. These invisible threads aren't made of love or loyalty. They're made of unconscious roles: rescuer, validator, empath, scapegoat. Roles you never agreed to but were slowly cast into. And so, when you step away, it isn't just your body that's gone. It's the entire structure that collapses. Suddenly, they have to hold their own weight. And for many, that weight feels unbearable. Not because you're irreplaceable, but because they were never standing on their own to begin with. What makes these invisible threads so powerful is that they grow silently, nurtured not by explicit agreements, but by subtle expectations. A glance, a sigh, a repeated need. They all become signals in a code you slowly learn to read and respond to until one day you find yourself entangled in a pattern of emotional obligations you never consciously accepted. And perhaps what's more tragic is that you start confusing these silent roles for intimacy. You begin to believe that your worth is tied to how well you soothe others, how quickly you respond to their unspoken wounds, how invisibly you hold their emotional structures together. Your presence becomes a utility, not a relationship. But the moment you step back, the energy shifts. It's not just a withdrawal, it's a rupture in a script that had you playing the invisible protagonist. Without you, they lose the comfort of predictability, the emotional equilibrium you quietly maintained. Their discomfort isn't really about your absence. It's about the chaos your absence unmasks. And that's when something astonishing happens. They begin to panic, but not outwardly. They may appear indifferent, even cold. But beneath the surface, their mind is scrambling to recalibrate, to make sense of how the world feels less stable without someone they thought was merely peripheral. The truth is, you were never on the edges. You were central. And your silence, your detachment, forces them to confront just how much of their reality depended on someone who never asked for that role. 2. You were never truly seen. That's perhaps the cruelest part of human relationships, how often people interact, not with who you are, but with who they need you to be. Their version of you is a mirror they've constructed, polished and placed in the corner of their mind. You weren't invited for your essence. You were summoned for your function. And the moment you walk away, that mirror cracks. They panic, not because you left, but because the illusion they relied on begins to fade. It wasn't you they were attached to. It was the story they told themselves through you. Your patience meant they were lovable. Your silence meant they were right. Your presence meant they didn't have to face their own reflection. But when you stop playing your part, they're forced to look at the script without its star. And the silence is deafening. They feel betrayed, not because you changed, but because you stopped pretending. When someone projects their needs, insecurities, or unresolved wounds onto you, they don't just misinterpret you, they rewrite you. Bit by bit, your real identity is replaced by a symbolic one. The calm friend, the dependable partner, the one who always understands. These aren't just descriptions, they're disguises, veils over your humanity. You become a psychological placeholder, an external form where they deposit what they cannot bear to hold themselves. They fear abandonment, so they turn you into permanence. They dread judgment, so they cast you as unconditional. But none of it has anything to do with who you actually are. And when you remove yourself from the frame, the projection collapses. That collapse doesn't feel like insight, it feels like betrayal. To them, you've changed, but in truth, you've only stopped agreeing to a role you never wanted. You refuse to be a screen for their fears, and that refusal feels like a personal attack. In the aftermath, they may react with rage or sorrow, but those feelings are not directed at the real you. They're directed at the loss of control, at the discomfort of being exposed to their own unprocessed truths. You've forced a confrontation they never wanted, to see you clearly, and through that, to see themselves. And so they resist. They cling to the false you, the one who never said no, the one who always smiled. They try to summon that version of you back, not to reconnect, but to regain the stability your projection gave them. But illusions, once broken, cannot be reassembled. 3. Absence isn't quiet. It echoes, not with noise, but with an invisible resonance that shakes everything assumed to be stable. When you disappear from their daily rhythm, the silence becomes confrontational. Every empty moment becomes a reminder, not of you, but of their dependency on you. It's not nostalgia, it's not loss, it's exposure. Your absence exposes the fragile scaffolding they built their lives upon. The energy you gave so freely, your attention, your empathy, your list, tending, was never neutral. It formed the architecture of their emotional certainty. When that architecture collapses, it leaves behind a void, and human beings fear the void more than anything. Not because it is empty, but because it reflects back what was never whole. And what's left is not grief. It's anxiety. Anxiety that comes from recognizing how dependent they were on a connection they never truly understood. An echo doesn't ask to be heard. It insists. Your absence begins to echo on the moments they least expect. A silence in conversation, a decision they now have to make alone. A crisis without the usual emotional buffer. These moments aren't about you. They're about the space you once occupied and what now rushes in to fill it. The echo reveals how much noise your presence used to quiet. They didn't realize it at the time, of course. Most people don't. They think they are self-sufficient, whole, until the silence shows otherwise. The discomfort they now feel isn't about loss. It's about what your absence makes them hear. The internal dialogue they've avoided for years. And for some, this echo becomes unbearable. They attempt to silence it through distraction, blame, or a desperate effort to replace you. But the echo persists because it isn't really about you at all. It's about the hollowness they hoped your presence would conceal. You became, unknowingly, a soundproof room for their chaos. And now that the walls are gone, every echo ounces back louder than before. The irony is sharp. You had to leave in order for them to finally listen. 4. The true storm begins after you're gone. In the aftermath of your decision, emotions rise like waves crashing against a broken dam. Anger, confusion, guilt, they cycle through like seasons with no weather forecast. They are not grieving you, they are grieving the illusion they thought they had control over. Because your leaving doesn't just remove a person, it removes a context. The version of themselves that existed in relation to you dissolves, and suddenly they are not who they thought they were. Who are they without your validation? without your calming presence, without someone to anchor their drama, their insecurity, their cycles. And this identity crash isn't visible on the surface. It lurks in the changes of tone, the long silences, the resentment. But at the core, it's always the same question whispered in their unconscious. Was I ever whole without them? It's not that they miss you. It's that they miss the version of themselves that only existed in your presence. The moment you step away, a domino effect begins. It's not always visible. It may even be denied. But deep within, their emotional structure begins to collapse. You were the unacknowledged foundation, and now the building shakes. This shaking comes with chaos, mood swings, indirect communication, passive-aggressive comments, or even cold detachment. But don't be fooled. Thus, it go away are not signs of healing. They are the early stages of psychological withdrawal. It's like an addict being separated from the source of their comfort. Their sense of self, previously bolstered by their interactions with you, becomes unstable. If you were their emotional compass, what happens when that compass disappears? The answer is disorientation, and with it, fear. But fear unacknowledged often emerges as resentment. They may accuse you of being selfish, cold, dramatic. But beneath the accusation is a deeper cry. I don't know who I am without you reflecting me back to myself. And yet, this is the truth they must face if they are ever to stand without leaning. This crash is cruel but not unproductive. Some will resist it, others will rise from it, but no one walks away from it unchanged. 5. People don't cope with reality. They reconstruct it. After you walk away, they begin to reframe the story, not to understand you, but to survive themselves. One might cast you as the villain to justify their anger. Another might make you a saint because regret burns too much to hold. This is not about you, it never was. It's about making your absence digestible. They can't sit with uncertainty, so they shape certainty, even if it's fiction. They decide why you left. They invent aren't what you must be thinking. They tell themselves it was always coming. And perhaps the saddest part is this. The person they create in their minds post-departure is more real to them than the one you truly were. Because memory isn't about accuracy, it's about comfort. And if remembering you truthfully hurts, they'll remember you differently. People do not process the truth, they package it. The moment you walk away, they begin the repackaging process, because living in the raw discomfort or of uncertainty is too much. It's far easier to wrap your absence in a narrative than to sit in the silence it leaves behind. For some, this means painting you as the villain. They'll recall every flaw, amplify every mistake, and convince themselves that losing you was a relief. For others, it means sanctifying you, turning you into an impossible ideal, because regret is easier to carry when it's tied to a martyr. But both narratives are mechanisms of avoidance. The reality is hard. Are to hold that you left not because of them, but for yourself. That you walked away not in cruelty, but in clarity. That you simply stopped sacrificing your peace for someone else's comfort. This is the version of you they cannot reconcile. And so, instead of making peace with the real you, they craft stories that allow them to sleep at night. Stories where they are the misunderstood hero, and you the incomprehensible force of change. They don't need to understand you, they need to protect themselves from what understanding you would reveal. 6. It's easy to believe that walking away is weakness, avoidance, or cruelty, but in truth it's one of the most radical acts of self-respect. When you step away, you interrupt a pattern of overgiving, a pattern of silent tolerance, a pattern of being everything for everyone except yourself. You draw a line where there used to be a door, and that line becomes a message. It says, I will no longer betray myself for your comfort. That message, though silent, is often received like an explosion. Because those who benefited from your lack of boundaries rarely celebrate the emergence of one. Your walkaway is power, not because it punishes others, but because it honors your truth. It reveals the imbalance, the one-sidedness, the silent weight you carried, and in doing so, it returns you to yourself. To walk away is not to flee, it is to reclaim. You don't leave because you've given up. You leave because you finally recognize how much of yourself you were giving away. Each step back is a step inward, toward boundaries, toward honesty, toward the self you neglected in your attempt to be everything for everyone. But this reclaiming terrifies others. They were used to a version of you who tolerated too much, gave too quickly, forgave too easily. This new you, this quiet, distant, boundary-drawing version, is unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity often breeds resentment. Yet, what they call cold is actually clarity. What they label distant is imply your refusal to self-abandon. You are not punishing them, you are protecting yourself, and in doing so, you show them a path they may one day need to take themselves. Walking away is an act of liberation, yes, but not only yours. It plants seeds in the minds of others, seeds that say you too can choose peace over performance. 7. Not every connection is meant to be lifelong. Sometimes your departure is the most loving thing you could do, for both of you. Because your presence was preventing them from facing what needed to be seen. Your kindness was enabling their avoidance. Your loyalty was keeping them stuck, and so your distance becomes a mirror. Some will grow in that mirror, others will shatter. But you, by stepping back, allow life to rearrange what you were holding in place. You were never meant to be emotional scaffolding. That's not love, that's survival. And survival without self-awareness is a slow decay. Your distance gives them the space they never wanted but always needed. And it gives you the clarity to see the difference between connection and captivity. Distance does something presence never could. It creates perspective. When you were close, they couldn't see you clearly. Your compassion was mistaken for obligation. Your presence was taken for permanence. But with distance, the shape of your absence forces a new kind of recognition. They begin to realize what they relied on. The moments they dismissed now become sacred. The energy you poured into them now feels irreplaceable. But more importantly, they begin to face the uncomfortable reality of how much of their growth they outsourced to you. And you, freed from the demands of their expectations, begin to grow as well, not in rebellion but in recovery. You rediscover your voice, your values, your stillness. You begin to build a life that doesn't need to bend around others to feel whole. The gift of distance is mutual. It's the silent agreement that healing sometimes requires space, and that space, though painful, often becomes the birthplace of something far more real than whatever existed before it. You see, walking away was never meant to hurt them. It was meant to honor you. And yet, in that motion, you stirred something in others that no confrontation could. You shattered the illusion that your presence was casual, replaceable, or conditional. You expose the unspoken truth that many relationships are less about love and more about need, about roles we quietly assume without knowing. What they feel isn't about missing you, it's about confronting a version of themselves that only surfaced in your presence. Without you, they're left with the raw silence of their own unfinished story. And while some will try to rewrite the past to make sense of your absence, idealizing you, demonizing you, others, a rare few, will face the truth that your leaving wasn't betrayal, it was a boundary, and that is your gift. Because in the end, your departure became their turning point. It was a mirror they could no longer avoid, and perhaps the first moment they began to truly see themselves. What they feared wasn't your distance, it was their dependence. And what you gave them, without intending to, was the chance to stand without leaning. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson. You left to heal. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the real lessons are taught.